What is going on, everybody? My name's Ryan, the official host here at Reddit Voice, and today we're going to be looking at some of the top stories from r/ProRevenge. Before we do, though, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and lastly, give a good ol' smack to that notification bell to stay up to date on all the latest videos. Be a racist and lie on your neighbors? Welcome to Eviction, Population U. Okay, I'll share another revenge. I'm only vengeful when someone deserves it, and that's usually often, so I'll share one I did from 2011. Anyone who's seen my posts know I used to work in the private security field. Not mall cops, but highly trained and skilled armed security. We worked residential buildings and complexes that were very high-end, like $200,000 cars in the parking garages high-end. Now places like this are Karen Central. Imagine apartments full of Karens and entitled teens. Now the company owner was awesome. A cop as his regular job, he understood what we faced. His advice was to be nice but put the hammer down, if you have to, and don't take their shit. Also, that if we didn't get at least 2 complaints a month for worthless crap, then we weren't engaging in the residents enough. LOL. So this is important to the revenge. Each supervisor had 10 to 15 properties under their control. Regular offices patrolled them, but we were in charge of helping with evictions, attending town hall on security issues, deciding how an officer patrols, or updating what areas are being a problem or needing checked. I had 12. Now in this one apartment complex, we had a couple always calling us. We has an emergency line open from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. When we get there, they cry about their upstairs neighbor. It was a list of things they just changed. Stomping, music, talking, cooking smells, their dog going number 1 on the balcony and it dripping onto theirs, valid complaints, and if we found evidence, which we never did, then they would see that they were starting to question if they were real and changed tactics and went to racist. The couple above them was a sweet and wonderful middle-aged Asian couple. Husband was an immigrant, but the wife was born and raised American. These racist cretins had only talked to the husband, so they assumed, as all racists do, that they were both immigrants. So, this white sheet-wearing couple started making comments like, "Those Asians," and "They're in America, why can't they cook American food?" And I'm afraid to be in the parking garage while one of them is driving in it. While it angered me for those comments alone, it wasn't enough for an eviction. Only thing I could do was have my officers put exact phrasing in the report. I did ask the property manager about the comments, and she said if they didn't say them to the residents and the residents didn't complain, then there wasn't much she could do. So I tried to think of some way to get them evicted. Not only were they lying to get a couple evicted, but they were calling in false things and just wasting the officers' time to respond. And they didn't call just every once in a while. They called sometimes twice in one night, usually 5 to 8 times a week. So a month later, the opportunity was handed to me. The Asian couple called me during the day and informed me that they were going out of the country to China for 2 weeks, and no one would be in their apartment. They told me this just in case the other couple started complaining. I would know that they are lying, and asked to check their door once a night and make sure it was locked and not broken into. I informed the Asian couple to not tell their neighbor, and none of them that they were leaving, and besides myself, only tell the property manager. We had a patrol meeting that night, and officers didn't work one specific region, so I told them all my plan. I wanted them to respond each time they called and write down exactly what they said happened, and also any racial terms, no matter how minor. Mark the report urgent and send it out. We had an online system for all business, emails, schedules, report submitting, and you get the idea. So away we go. During those 14 days, they complained 18 times. Everything was documented, and I took it to the manager. She looked it over and said, "Let's evict them." Side note, the client gets charged more for emergency responses than they do for regular patrols, meaning that their lies were costing money. So there was no HOA because there were rentals, and in this situation myself, the property manager and the tenants sit down at a table. The charges for eviction are read. If the eviction of security related, then I say what violations have been broken, etc. Not opinions, just facts based on the reports which the tenants get a copy of. Then the tenants have a right to speak and ask questions. The property manager then decides what happens next. Do they stay or do they go? So they were sent a formal letter stating that they were facing eviction and had 10 days to set up a meeting. If not, the eviction would be processed. They set one up, and I get there, and the a-hole couple and the manager are already present. The wife immediately digs into me because I was armed. Uniforms for those situations are a dress shirt, slacks, tie, and one weapon and one magazine. Thing PS like electricians can be dangerous. I just politely informed her that it was my uniform and not her call to make. She tried to say she felt uncomfortable and wanted to reschedule, but the manager said this happens now or I will evict you. So they agreed to continue. Now for legal reasons, these sessions were recorded by video. That way the tenant can't lie in eviction court or sue. In front of me were all 18 reports and went over each one. Time, date, and who called, apartment numbers, everything. I also read out each line telling them to tell me what they feel is false and what is true. The only thing they said is that the racial terms weren't true. At the end of each report, I basically said the report is accurate in the fact that tenants in apartment XYZ were playing their music too loud, but you're claiming the comments about their race are false. I got a yes answer every time. About the 7th one, I think the wife caught on. She started complaining that I was dragging it out, and I just smiled politely and reminded her that this was my time and she ample opportunity to object and ask me questions, but only after I was done, and then went through the rest and let them build a defense. Then after I was done getting to admit the lies, I informed them that the tenants in said apartment were actually out of the country at the time of those 18 reports, and that the tenants provided proof that they were gone, and my officers checked the apartment one time a night and confirmed that it was empty. Then I smiled pleasantly and ended my part, but the look on their face was a mixture of anger and fear. They didn't have a defense, basically saying myself and the manager were choosing immigrants over Americans. Oh, did I mention the manager is an immigrant? That went over like a hand grenade in a collection plate. Once they said that, she stopped it and told them she was... That made matters worse because they said she was just taking up for her own kind. During this, I'm calm and collected, and inside my mind I'm thinking, oh shit. After a few more racial remarks, the manager just stopped them and said guilty, and that she would process the eviction paperwork with the courts in the morning. Long story short, they were given 14 days. From what I heard, the judge gave them 30 until they called them a racial name. I was able to call the nice Asian couple and let them know that it was over and that they didn't have to worry because they would no longer respond to calls about their apartment for the next 14 days until eviction came through and that the bad tenants left. But they were welcome to call anytime if they need help or have an issue. Security officers want to help so bad but are limited by either laws, property management, rule, or both, so it's nice to do some good. Update. Thanks for the awards, everyone. I debated even posting this and did not expect it to blow up the way it did. Write me up for simple mistakes to get me fired? Prepare to get fired. Here's a little context here. This is written by the same person who wrote the last story. I told someone this story and they directed me here. Anyways, private security was my field up until a few years ago. When I say security, I don't mean mall cops, but high-end, armed, trained security. I spent a few years working a job in another city away from home, but the company went under, so I decided to move back home. I found a security job online. It was simple, entry-level, basically sitting behind a computer. You were security for the building, but monitored security for other sites the company owned across 3 states, like small repair places, factories, places where they stored vehicles, etc. So I submitted my resume. The next day, a guy calls and sets up an interview. Awesome, because I needed to find work fast. Went into the interview, conducted by a woman all called Jane. She was the supervisor, and the guy I talked to was her boss. Jane immediately told me I was way overqualified, which I found strange but okay. Interview went fine, and I left. A few hours later, she called and said I was hired and set up training days. No, I won't go through that, just wanted to give background, so let's go to the good parts. She always gave me a cold shoulder. Her boss found out I have all the qualifications, licensing, and training to be armed, so he had me come in armed. Nothing fancy, handgun, 3 mags, and handcuffs. She would always make comments about how everyone should be armed. A few of my coworkers I wouldn't trust with a water gun, and she should decide who's armed. These little comments get under my skin. Then one day it happened. I was walking to the front desk for reception that day, and she sends me a message over Messenger telling me she needs to see me. I go back and she drags me to a side office with a write-up form. Apparently, when I added door access to visitors' badges, I added the door to the gym in the basement. A mistake, but not life-threatening. A week later, I didn't sign my timesheet, and another for not filing in a form correctly. All minor things that everyone has done or did. By the end, it came about 9 months into the job when I looked at the new timesheet. I was paired with a new officer who hadn't been there a month, and only he was lifted as a supervisor. Confused, I took it to her second in command. I'll call Hi Bob. A great guy. He told me that he brought it up and that I had the experience and seniority to be promoted, and she basically just told him to F off because it was her choice. Anyways, that got me mad, so I started planning revenge. I don't normally do this, but I knew one more write-up would get me fired no matter how minor the infraction was. Good thing is, during the night shift, there's only 2 people. We can't see each other's computers, so I started thinking. I remembered about 4 months prior to her car breaking down in the parking lot across the street. Instead of having it towed, Jane's father decided to fix it there. No big deal, only during that time Jane was bringing her husband back into the security office. This was a huge deal. The office took scanning at 3 doors and a keypad to enter. In the whole building, only the security staff and 1 cleaning guy had access to. It was the HQ for the company, and not even the executives had access. From our company computers, we could open any door, turn off any camera or alarm, and open any gate in any building what the company owned. So it was a big deal because we had the keys to the kingdom, and this was a huge violation. So I hatched my plan. Under the excuse of having a smoke, I went out to the reception and copied the visitor's log from those days. I then went back in and accessed the video feeds, and you could go back a year on all the video feeds, and took a screenshot of her husband entering the doors and office. The office itself had no camera, as well as with the timestamps of him leaving and the fact that he never swiped in, which following someone into a door, even if they hold it open, you must scan your card. I logged onto my private email and sent it to another email knowing they don't log what you do on the computers. I got home and sent all the pics and the logs companies and everything to not only her boss, but his boss whose job was investigating breaches and theft. I also included every dirty trick she pulled, playing favoritism, etc. The fallout didn't take long. 2 days later, a Friday, I went in the afternoon shift and Bob was at Jane's workstation. I looked confused and said Jane was suspended for a week and that Monday I had to come in and speak with her boss and boss's boss, but I would be paid for it. Also, everyone was interviewed. There were great rumors that were flying around that I was laughing on the inside. Okay, interview day. I go in and they started questioning me. They knew I worked while she brought in her husband and asked me. I spilled everything after acting scared and getting assurances it would be confidential and I won't be punished. I didn't tell them I sent it, but they asked everyone. I left out some things in the email and added some things that weren't. I didn't want to be labeled as a snitch. It went on for an hour and I left. Next day, an email's waiting. Jane was fired, Bob was in charge until a replacement is added. I had a long talk with Bob that day. Turns out Jane was scared of me because I was more qualified for her job than she was and knew I was her boss's golden boy. She was afraid, and rightfully so it turned out, that I might take her job and admitted to him she wanted me gone. A fact he told me in his interview. Also that she didn't want to hire me, but her bosses made her. Turns out her boss was aware of things and was looking for an excuse to fire her, but it had to be big. Jane had been working at that department for 10 years, and it was her first real job, and security was all she knew. They blacklisted her, which means unless a company was really desperate, she wouldn't get a security job anywhere in the state. Icing on the cake. I know you want to know, yes, I was offered her job. No, I didn't take it. I told them that Bob deserved it more. He did, and that I would be happy being a shift supervisor. So that's what I stayed for the next 2 years until I left. Thanks for sticking with me. TLDR, boss was scared of me replacing her, tried to get me fired for petty infractions, told her boss about major infractions. And with that, my friends, we've reached the end of today's video. If you liked it, make sure to check out some of our other stuff and even subscribe. As always, my name's Ryan, the official host here at Reddit Voice, and I look forward to seeing each and every one of you guys in the next video.